Even one down the sideline, and he's got Carson over the top. Big side, down the sideline. Touchdown. His signature move and his signature performance. Allen, big ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network.
What is up, Bruin Bible listeners? Will Decker, your host, here with the madman, Jamal Madney in the house. This is for ESPN Radio. Make sure to tune in to the LA Football Show whenever you guys potentially get a chance. We'll be here on Fridays and other days of the week, potentially moving forward. So make sure to check this out. LA Football Network on ESPN 1090, the mightier, the radio. Sponsored by, we got Underdog Fantasy and Bet Online. Use promo code LAFB, UCLA LAFB for the promo code. And you guys will be able to get matched up to $500 in purchases and bets and deposits. Madman, how are we doing as we lean into the offensive coordinator talk for UCLA football? You're in St. Louis right now. What's going on, man?
Doing well, Thriller. You know, a couple hours ahead of you here in St. Louis on some business travel. But you and I, we just have to jump on and talk about this OC. There's just so much excitement and buzz and energy with this program that I know you and I both can't control ourselves with just being able to talk as much Bruin football as possible. And what a great place this is to be. We had such an incredible ceremony and, incoming with Deshaun Foster last week. And now all eyes and ears and hearts now point to who will be this offensive coordinator. It's always such a pleasure to get it going with you.
I love it, man. Yeah, I can never control myself when it comes to talking about UCLA football. So very excited to get this thing rolling. I've got a couple names I think you're going to be very interested in. Some are obvious. Some I haven't even heard of, but it makes sense given the geographical location, given kind of the checkpoints that Martin Jarman laid out for what he'd be desiring in an OC, where he wants a guy that's been the head man before, that's had experience doing a lot of different things. Madman, I've got a couple names. As always, I'm going to let you start and lead the pack on this one. Give me your first name that really kind of intrigues you when it comes to the offensive coordinator position for UCLA.
Yeah, Will, this is interesting because I sort of zoomed out much like you, and I just kind of looked at the holistic picture. And one of the things that I wanted to look for is just really high quality competence, being able to coach offense, and someone who was very decorated, particularly with passing the football. Because, of course, Deshaun Foster's background with the run game, you want to be able to complement that from more of a passing variety. And so for me, I kind of zoomed out and said, head coach, not head coach, older, younger. I sort of let that part of it go and just said, who's someone who's really good at coaching offense that's flying under the radar? And obviously, Will, the last couple of days, you and I have talked about the Tommy Reeses and the Eric Bieniemys and so forth. But I really wanted to sort of pick some names that folks may not be thinking of. And the first name, Will, that came to mind was 28-year-old Ben Arbuckle, the offensive coordinator of Washington State, who led the Cougars to a top 10 offense with Cam Ward this past year in 2023. And let's not forget the year before, Will, in 2022, he was the offensive coordinator of Western Kentucky, which was the number one offense in all of college football in 2022. So he's young. He's proven over the last couple of years at different stops. Now you sort of take his mind and bring his energy and enthusiasm with Deshaun Foster's, and you bring it with a much greater brand that is UCLA and those facilities and that momentum. And I think there could be a real diamond in the rough with the likes of a Ben Arbuckle.
I like it, man. This is the guy that coached Bailey Zappi back in Western Kentucky to records and what he was able to achieve there. Big passing guy. And, when you go to Washington State, it's a program where even it's been different coaches and different regimes. You think of passing first. Like the first player you think of, Ryan Leaf, who was coming up in that Heisman race. You think of Mike Leach and the air raid system he implemented there. You also think of Cam Ward and what he was able to kind of do there under the likes of a Ben Arbuckle. So I like the fit, man. I think it's an interesting pick. This guy is originally from Texas. Can he get in there and kind of learn? And, like LA, I think that'd be a very visionary pick. Ben Arbuckle, his passing mind mixed with Deshaun Foster's running mind, I think that's a recipe for success, man. So I'll say I was not expecting that as the first choice, but I love it the more and more we talk about it. So Ben Arbuckle, would like to see where he's going. I'd like to see how he recruits a little bit more too.
Sure.
This would probably be his most high-profile recruiting spot. But in terms of scheme and how he can implement the UCLA offense, I think it's a natural fit, man. So I really like that one. I'm going to go to the obvious one. The fan base is pining for this guy. He deserves to be talked about. And there's a lot to like about him too when you really break it down. Brennan Marion was the offensive coordinator for UNLV this past year. He kind of gets widely credited for Jaden Maiva, who's transferring now to USC. They had an offense that was 22 in the scoring offense in college football last year. There's a lot to like about what he brought to the table. Top 50 in rushing, 42nd in total offense. And what I think a lot of people like about this guy is he's kind of that young, hungry assistant. He's in his mid to late 30s. He's kind of developed an offensive system in a way. I've really kind of went in depth on this guy. He started this go-go offense, which is a concept of a, wing T as well as a spread offense. So it's very different. It's very new. He's kind of his own creator of this system. So he has a track record moving forward. And if you're liking what Texas is doing, he was on the offensive staff with Sarkisian before taking that offensive coordinator job at UNLV. So Brennan Marion, lot to like there. I think that's the obvious choice. Give me your thoughts on Marion on the surface, because while I like him, I think there are better opportunities out there for the OC, and I'm willing to give him a shot if that's the guy, but I'm also open to hearing more of, different thoughts that we have. What do you think about Marion, Madman?
No, absolutely, Will. I think it's a very credible candidate for sure. Lot to like, all of the things that you laid out. I mean, number one, he's an innovator, right? And I think you're always looking for what's the next wave of disruptive thinking that's going to give you an edge. And you talked about this go-go offense, which is a combination of kind of the pace of the spread and then obviously kind of the truncation of the wing T, if you will. So you can go power, you can go speed. It's a very versatile offense. And then when you talk about how he's been able to develop Jordan Maeva to the point where it's sort of he's gone now to USC, where Lincoln Riley has sort of caught his eye and wants to be able to mold him moving forward. You obviously have to be doing something right in terms of setting up Maeva for success to follow in the footsteps of a Kyler Murray or a Baker Mayfield or a Hurts or a Caleb Williams and so on and so forth. So I think the setup is really nice. They went 9-5 this year. I think the tutelage under Sarkisian and sort of that lineage makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, I think geography, when you talk about UNLV and kind of understanding the Southwest, understanding this particular region, knowing some of the hotbeds of talent in between California and Texas, finding those unique high school spots and pipelines, lot to really like here, Will. So I really like your pick there.
Yeah. So Brennan Marion, it's a guy we have to throw out just given the rumors and how the fan base wants to talk about him. Give me your number two. Who are you thinking number two would be a good fit with UCLA moving forward?
So, Will, I'm going to give you another kind of curveball that a lot of folks aren't really talking about, and this is Eric Morris, the offensive coordinator of North Texas. So, North Texas, again, a very decorated year this year offensively in the top 10. Eric Morris was actually the offensive coordinator of Washington State the year prior. So the first year of Cam Ward and sort of that emergence when Cam Ward sort of blistered on the scene. And what folks don't realize, Will, is Eric Morris has had a long track record here of offensive coordinator success. Cliff Kingsbury often gets sort of tied in with Patrick Mahomes. But guess what? Eric Morris was the offensive coordinator at Texas Tech when Patrick Mahomes was there. So when you talk about the air raid concepts with a Mahomes at Texas Tech, then you talk about what he was able to do with the likes of a Cam Ward. Then you talk about what he was able to do at a smaller school like North Texas, where he wasn't presented with as much talent in the trenches as well as on the outside. And yet time and again, producing top 10 offenses. Eric Morris is a name a lot of people aren't talking about, but again, a very innovative mind that I think could do wonders with the likes of a Deshaun Foster in the running game and the likes of a Jerry Neuheisel from a wide receiver perspective.
Yeah, Eric Morris, we talked about this before with Bieniemy. You want to have guys that have any ties to Patrick Mahomes right now. And while I thought, if you were looking at the totality of the Texas Tech team, I often laugh at the fact they were under 500 with Patrick Mahomes. You can't blame the offense, though. They were putting up points at will. It was that classic Big 12 shootout. So if you're just focusing on the offense, there's a lot of positives with those teams, right? With Mahomes leading the way and Texas Tech putting up, top 3 within the Big 12 in scoring. So the fact that we're just focusing on the offense, there's a lot to like there. Texas Tech went and kind of developed Cam Ward. His best year technically was about 2 years ago, despite the hot start he had this year at Washington State. So he helped mold Cam Ward a little bit more. And we've talked about this with Bieniemy, like if he's close enough with Mahomes where he's in a recruit's house, he's talking to a quarterback and he goes, hey, you want to go FaceTime Patrick Mahomes? What 17, 18-year-old kid is going to say no to that? So you have NFL ties. You've got, Kingsbury, I think we can all say is a very innovative offensive mind. There's a reason he was open for a lot of different offensive coordinator jobs. The NFL committed to the Raiders, then went to the Commanders. So at least 2 NFL teams were all in on getting Kingsbury. This guy's studying under him. And if it's just the offensive side of the ball, I'm cool with it. So Eric Morris, I think, is another name where, wasn't at the top of my list, but I'm excited we got to Eric Morris because it invites the conversation of what are we exactly looking for with this offensive coordinator moving forward. And, I'll check off Eric Bieniemy with that too. A guy that we feel very similarly about. I know a lot of people are going, hey, man, this guy, Coach Patrick Mahomes, he's won multiple Super Bowls. Guess who doesn't have a job right now? Eric Bieniemy. Right. The only way to get better at coaching is to have a job. In the long-term prospects of this might be a little bit difficult, but originally from LA, UCLA running backs coach, lots of great things going on there with what he could potentially bring to the table. He's talked at lengths about what he meant. I mean, the Chiefs invited him back into the building to give a pump-up speech to the offense. Like, when does this happen? I've never heard of a former coach that was let go being re-invited back in to kind of fire up the guys the week of the Super Bowl. So Bieniemy clearly has, his face cemented within that locker room as somebody that they really loved and believed in. The only thing that scares me is the long-term propositions, because I think once the NFL comes calling back, he's going to be right back there. But he doesn't have a job. He's from LA. Deshaun Foster, I'm sure there's some overlapping relationship there because he was the running backs coach right after Deshaun left. So there's got to be some sort of relationship there. I don't know. Am I crazy for thinking Bieniemy could be the guy?
No, Will, not at all. And I think that there's an element of pedigree, there's an element of preparation, and then there's also an element of personality with Eric Bieniemy. When you talk about the pedigree and coming through that Andy Reid coaching tree, and we can argue and split hairs over how much he was involved in the offense, but even if he was involved in the offense at a cursory level, to get the Andy Reid PhD in offense, to get the Andy Reid education in offense counts for a ton. Then when you talk about the pedigree, when it comes to the likes of being able to coach the best player in the game and Patrick Mahomes and just having that cachet and that aura associated with it is absolutely huge. And then the third piece, Will, we talked about is the personality. He complements Deshaun Foster so well, a bigger personality, I think a more dynamic recruiter at the surface, and someone who's a little bit older that can sort of balance off the youth of Deshaun Foster in a really positive way. So much to like about Eric Bieniemy, not to mention the UCLA ties. He really started his coaching career with UCLA. You couple that with Deshaun's passion for the Bruins, and you really have some magic here. So not crazy in any way, shape, or form, Will. I think Bieniemy would be a slam dunk hire in this particular situation.
Yeah, so Bieniemy is a guy that we've talked about. There's a couple other obvious names we have still left in the stables. But, man, I'm excited to get to my last two because I know you're kind of going to be like, wow, I didn't think about that. Like, that would be interesting. Talk to me about your third guy that you believe should be considered for the opening of offensive coordinator for our UCLA football Bruins.
Yeah, Will, I think I'm going to give you another third name that's a little bit off the beaten path here. And this is a guy that's been able to, again, produce perennial top 20 offenses the last 2 years. He has had a really nice run of being able to coach on offense. And that's Tim Cramsey, the offensive coordinator of Memphis. And when you talk about how Memphis has been able to evolve and adapt over the years as a program, when you talk about offensive variety. They've got some West Coast elements. They've got some old run and shoot elements. They've got kind of traditional pro style play action elements. When I look at Tim Cramsey and I look at his body of work, there's really a flexibility to his offensive scheme where he really caters it to his personnel. And I think that's really the sign of a terrific coach, is when you can cater your offensive system depending on who you have. And when you are at a place like UCLA, where you're going to be very targeted from a recruiting standpoint, given academic standards, given the values, given the type of UCLA Bruin you want to bring in, some years you're going to be more power and play action. Some years you're going to be more spread it out. And having a guy like Cramsey kind of understand the bigger picture, again, someone who's floating under the radar here. But when you talk about value in terms of contract value and output, this is someone that I think can provide outsized returns.
Yeah, they finished 14th in total offense this year, under Ryan Silverfield. You're hitting a team that's close to home too, because before I worked on the West Coast, I worked for the Memphis Tigers, man. So I was in some of those, press rooms when they had Mike Norvell, who eventually went to Florida State, when they got Silverfield and they brought in a guy like Tim Cramsey. So I've been around these guys. Cramsey is a name that I really, really like. And it's crazy to think about. When I was at Memphis, Madman, they had Dan Lanning, they had Kenny Dillingham, and they had Mike Norvell all on one staff. Like, think about how crazy that is.
A college version, Will, of the 2013 Commanders,
Yeah. It's pretty unbelievable when you think of the head coaching future talent in that room and what they're able to achieve. Dan Lanning's one of the biggest coaching stars in the ranks right now. So it's very, very cool to think of that. I like Tim Cramsey. Very good passing offense. Again, once again to pair with the likes of Deshaun Foster and what he could be able to do on the ground. So I like Cramsey, man. Here's some of the names that I got left on the list. David Shaw, very obvious. Son, walk on at UCLA. Maybe he doesn't want the head coaching job. Maybe he's similarly aligned to where Chip's at right now, where it's like, hey, being the CEO, the head man in charge, not really my thing at the college level. I can't take an offensive coordinator position and get that through. So we got to consider Shaw. Very good pro-style offenses he had. He's the guy that brought Christian McCaffrey to the farm and made Bryce Love a guy that was up for the Doak Walker. I mean, there's a lot of talent there in what he was able to do with the running backs room. Tommy Rees, we got to consider again too, right? He's a special teams coordinator. Was never blown away from it, away with Tommy Rees. His best offensive season was in 2021 for Notre Dame. They finished 56 in total offense with Alabama. When you have all 4- and 5-star players at your disposal, it wasn't crazy about him, so would not be my number one guess. Here's the last two guys that I got that I think you may be interested in. How about guy who's on TV right now, former offensive coordinator, former head coach. He kind of checks the boxes of what they're looking. Mark Helfrich.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Mark Helfrich. So when you really break it down, this guy inherited Chip Kelly's team at Oregon, was the head coach for Mariota in that national championship team. Brought them there to the national championship. Granted, did not end as well as we would have liked to see at Oregon. But then he went to the Chicago Bears. And at his time with the Bears, it was probably the only time Mitch Trubisky looked decent. They finished top 10 in scoring offense in 2018 when they went 12-4, for the Bears. They famously lost that playoff game against the Eagles when they hooked it off, the field goal post. But Helfrich is a guy that's been around. He's a head coach. He's on the West Coast. He has been opening for a job. He hasn't coached since 2019. There could be something there. I'm not saying this is the best candidate, but I'm saying West Coast guy, ties, been to the Big Ten country with the Bears, knows that area as well. You tie it with the Oregon ties, maybe there's something there. What do you think first and foremost about Helfrich as maybe an OC?
Well, I like it. And the reason I do is, you talked about it, an incredible offensive mind from a few years ago. Remember, he inherited things from Chip, as you said. They didn't miss a beat. He took them all the way to a national championship game and lost to Ohio State, ironically enough, which would be a Big Ten foe here. Very familiar with both Oregon and Washington and that region from a recruiting standpoint. And I think he has the mind to be able to overlay some of these historic Pac-12 teams, these 4, into the Big Ten and be able to be nimble with his style. You couple that with the fact that, again, he's older, he's a little bit more stoic, and I think it could help with some of the more fiery personalities on that staff like a Jerry Neuheisel and be able to sort of balance kind of the chemistry of that coaching staff. So I think Helfrich is certainly worth an interview, given his output, given where the experience was, and just given his overall knowledge of the offense.
Yeah, and I don't know if I don't even think he's probably top 3 or 4 for me, but given the qualifications that Martin Jarman laid out, there's a path there, right?
Yeah.
The other guy I've got for you, how about a guy that's been a head coach for close to a decade, kind of took a year off to be an offensive analyst, very familiar with Big Ten country. I'm talking about Paul Chryst, former Wisconsin coach, man. This guy was an offensive coordinator before. He's been in Pac-12 territory before. Oregon State's offensive coordinator in 2003, 2004. Was with Wisconsin for 7-8 years. Very quality head coach. Went to Texas as a offensive analyst this past year to Sarkisian. So you talk about Brennan Marion, you want to get some of the Sark offensive playbook in here. But what about Paul Chryst, who's been working with him for a year as well? I mean, you have more qualifications with Chryst if he wants to be the head coach there. So there's a lot to like there. I certainly think that's an intriguing name, and he knows the Big Ten country as well as anybody, given his Wisconsin ties. What do you think about Paul Chryst maybe as OC?
Absolutely, Will. And I think you nailed it there in terms of the key point is I don't think anybody knows the Big Ten of all the people we talked about as well as Paul Chryst would. And he led Wisconsin to Rose Bowl appearances, perennial top 5, top 10 rushing attack. So the question there would become, hey, if you're looking for Deshaun Foster to really grow in his role and sort of move away, obviously, from his running back specialty with the need to be an overall head coach, the CEO that Martin Jarman talked about, where it's the X's and O's on the field from a macro level, but also the fundraising and running the program, what better guy than a Paul Chryst to take the baton to be kind of that run-first team and maintain the quality of excellence that UCLA has had at the running back position. So I think that's a very viable candidate as well. You're talking about decades-long experience. And again, Paul Chryst could be very similar. His personality is kind of similar to Chip's, where now in this new age of college football, is Paul Chryst really interested in being the CEO? Or does he want to kind of go back to the way Chip did of just being able to coach offense and kind of getting back to his roots? So I really like that match as well, Will. And I think there's a lot to sort of dig in there. Certainly worth an interview. And then it's going to come down to personality mesh between him and Deshaun Foster. And if it clicks, I mean, this could be a very viable option.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the entire list I've got for you. Do you have any other names you think are intriguing that you would be interested in for UCLA to kind of get that offensive coordinator position filled and, figured out at the top?
Well, I think it was a pretty comprehensive list. I think we did a really nice job here of pulling from a diverse set of candidates, age, conference, geography, experience levels. The one add I'll make on the name, and you and I have had a lot of conversations about David Shaw as a head coach, as just the man that he is. Nobody would maybe be a better mentor to Deshaun Foster than David Shaw. And so if you're looking at someone who is potentially maybe not just honing in terms of that offensive coordinator position, but you're looking for some mentorship for this first-time coach, you probably want to take a look seriously at David Shaw. And it might not be the offensive coordinator position. David Shaw might be able to slide into that kind of director of leadership role that Coach Ken, had to let go of when he then took the San Jose State job. So I think there could be a really unique spot for David Shaw, being a father of a player on the UCLA team, but also just as a mentor to Deshaun Foster. So even if it's not OC, that director of leadership spot could be a really nice fit.
Yeah, I think that's spot on for David Shaw. If we can add him as a coach, as a mentor to Deshaun Foster, I think good things are going to be on the way here. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to have more of the LA Football Network coming live on the radio. Bruin Bible listeners on the podcast, thank you for listening. We're going to have more stuff covering the offensive coordinator opening all week long, so make sure to tune that in. Have a good one, guys. We will be in touch very, very soon. Take